Today on the podcast, I have Becca Pratt joining me from beccapratt.com. She's also on Instagram at beccapratt_teach. Becca is a reading specialist with her master's degree in education. She's also been trained in Orton-Gillingham and is very confident in all of the strategies that are supported by the science of reading. Becca and I have a wonderful conversation in this podcast episode, talking all about the importance of parents working with their kids at home and helping their kids learn to read. Becca and I share such similar philosophies and similar missions that we believe that parents are the absolute best teachers for their kids. And we believe that parents can be empowered to teach their kids at home, even if they don't have a degree in education. Listen in as Becca shares some great strategies and tips she uses with her students that she tutors, but also with her own kids at home as she is in the beginning stages of teaching her 3-year-old how to read. Let's dive in to this episode with Becca. And if you have any questions or comments, please make sure to reach out to Becca or myself. You can find us both on Instagram. Hey, Becca, thanks so much for being on the Little Stuff Learning podcast.
Hi, Erin. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to chat with you. We connected through Instagram. We
Of
both have
course.
very similar missions, very similar philosophies about teaching kids to read. So why don't you start by letting the listeners know a little bit about you, your background, how you became a teacher, and then now how you're doing what you're doing now.
Yes, absolutely. So, I I like to say that my teaching journey started way back when I was 5. I have always wanted to be a teacher. I would sit all my cats down and try and like teach them down in my basement. And so my parents and my brothers always knew that I was destined to go into teaching, and that's exactly what I did. I graduated and went straight into intermediate elementary. So I spent most of my career in third, fourth, and fifth grade. And then my last year, I was a reading specialist for K through 6. So I saw all of the grades within that range. Um, yeah, and so I just kind of always knew that I was going to teach in some capacity. A couple of years ago, I stepped out of the classroom and just continued my private tutoring business. So I currently tutor students with dyslexia. And then kind of expanded that business into helping parents teach their kids to read through play, because I feel like there's almost this divide in Instagram land and social media land that some people are saying, "Well, we shouldn't teach our kids to read until they're 7, 8, 9, 10. Like just go at their slow pace." And some people are saying, you know, we we need to do it earlier than that. And I'm on that side, but I don't think that it needs to be done in a really structured formal environment. It's For me, it's all about opening people's eyes to the power of play that can go hand in hand with teaching kids to read.
I love that so much. Like I mentioned, we just have such similar philosophies. I am the same with
Yes.
you. I think that we can teach our kids through play and make it a really fun learning experience so that they're prepared
Mhm.
for school. Because I'm sure you saw in your classroom, even in the middle school, the middle elementary grades. And I saw in
Yes.
first and second grade when kids come in struggling and they have a very hard time catching up, it's you're just pushing a boulder uphill instead of
Yes.
just letting this flow happen where we can teach them naturally through play and we can set
Mhm.
the foundation. And so I, like you, want to start that sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And it sounds like we have very similar experiences with that. And as that I worked in a middle school for a few years as well. And when they get to that point, they already know they're struggling. They don't know, they don't know why they're struggling. And so they already feel separate from their peers. And so it's so much harder to get them help, not only because academically they're behind, but they're very aware that they're behind. And it's almost like they just shut down and don't want to attempt to do the work because it's been so hard for them forever, and they already feel like a social outcast. And most kids are very, very kind when it comes to academic differences. I know back in my day it was not like that. I think we're doing a great job of raising kinder kids these days, and especially with our push for social emotional learning. But I mean, still, middle school is tough, even if you are on a normal academic trajectory. And so when you throw in reading struggles, that just makes it even harder. So, kind of like you, I want to get in a lot earlier so we can fix those gaps before they even happen.
Absolutely. I mean, even as young as kindergarten, I tutored a kindergartner
Hmm.
who was in tears because she knew it didn't come as easily for her as it did to her peers. And as much as we can boost them up and say, like, let's just focus on you, I don't know if as humans we're just wired to look at other people to see and to
Yep.
compare, but even at 5, she was doing that, not because of the teacher or her parents, it was really coming
Right.
from her. And I also will say, some people I've seen will say, academics level out by 3rd grade. There's no
Hmm.
benefit to being an early reader. And what I would say to that, and I would love your opinion as well, is
Hmm.
the confidence that our kids have when they have that foundation and they read early. Maybe
Hmm.
academically by 3rd grade, you can't tell, but confidence wise, when you come in reading or have a strong foundation in reading, it makes a
Hmm.
difference.
Oh, absolutely. And I do feel like a lot of people misinterpret that research, and the kids who have parents who have access to a lot of those resources like private tutors, summer school type activities, sure, those kids can have a better chance at catching up, but the kids who don't have access to that, they are just continuing to be left behind. So I feel like some people don't quite dig into that research enough to really separate that just the access to materials that some kids just don't have.
Absolutely. It's such a social justice issue. And I love that you're
Yes.
focusing on teaching the parents how to teach their kids. And I
Hmm.
speak about that as well because not everyone has the access or the money to pay for private tutors, which can be
Hmm.
very pricey. So if you can learn these skills as a parent and teach your child, you can teach all of your children, however many you have, and you can support them
Yes,
the whole time, not just when you're paying for the tutor.
absolutely. And so many parents that I work with, they just have this, I guess, this mental block thinking that they don't know how to teach their kids to read, or their kids aren't going to listen to them, or they don't have the skills. But I truly believe that parents are the best teachers for their kids because they know their kids in and out. They know what motivates them. They have that relationship. And I think teaching your kid to read can strengthen the relationship between parent and kid rather than a lot of parents think, well, we're just going to battle and nobody's going to, my kid's not going to learn to read. I'm going to get frustrated. And I just don't find that. I think that we do have some work to do when it comes to parent education. Like, you are the best teacher for your child. Sure, you might not know the exact reading roadmap, you might not know all the phonics rules. That's okay. We can deal with that, but it's this: you are the best teacher for your child. And once parents have that belief and they embody that, then the sky's the limit.
Yes, it's all about that mindset, that growth
Hmm.
mindset for our parents
Oh,
too, that
yes.
yes, you can do this. I love that so much. Now, I do know that you also tutor and that you've been
Hmm.
trained in Orton-Gillingham. And a lot of our
Yes.
listeners might not know what Orton-Gillingham is, this
Hmm.
approach to teaching reading. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Orton-Gillingham is a very structured approach to teaching literacy. It's not a curriculum or a program, but it's an approach. And so it uses what we know about how the brain learns to read, and it's very individualized for the learner. So, kid A is not going to get the same lesson as kid B because they might have very different needs, or even if they have similar needs, the approach might be different. So, Orton-Gillingham uses a systematic, sequential, and multisensory approach. So, the systematic piece of it would just be breaking up reading concepts into manageable pieces. And then it really simplifies the act of reading because our brains are not naturally wired to read. And that's where I think a lot of people have misconceptions. They think that their kids just should naturally catch on if they read to them at home. And we know that's not the case with all this research, with decades of research that we have. The sequential piece is teaching in an order that makes sense and it builds in complexity. So I don't know about you, but I've taught with a lot of reading curriculums that seem to jump all over the place. It's confusing for kids. You have to supplement a lot. The sequence doesn't make sense. And with the Orton-Gillingham approach, it's very structured in that way where the concepts build on each other. And then the multisensory piece of it, it the lessons help engage visual, auditory, and kinesthetic senses, and so it engages more than one of these at a time, which proves to be really helpful for retention. And like you were saying earlier, Orton Gillingham tutoring is very expensive. And I think that's just such a huge barrier, like we were saying earlier, that some parents just don't have access to resources like that. They can't pay $120 an hour for their kid to see a specialized tutor twice a week. So my approach has been to bring these evidence-based ideas from the Orton-Gillingham approach, from structured literacy, the science of reading, earlier to parents. And I want parents to be able to incorporate them instead of waiting to see if their child is going to learn how to read. Um, with our current literacy statistics, as I'm sure you are aware, there's probably a good chance that most parents out there are going to have to deal with some sort of literacy supports needed for their child. And so I would have rather have those supports be very limited, just a teeny tiny support needed to get them from point A to point B, rather than they're in fourth, fifth, sixth grade and they still don't know all the sounds, and there's just a huge jump there. So that's kind of my approach, is taking all of what we know and bringing it to the parents so we get them on the ground floor.
Yes, prevention over intervention. I would
Yes,
love
yes,
that.
yes,
Let's
yes.
prevent these reading problems from even beginning. And if we
I
do have a
know.
problem, then of course we want intervention as early as
Yes.
possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been through Orton Gillingham training as well. And it was
Mm-hmm.
so eye-opening. It was the first time that I
Yes.
actually realized the appropriate way to teach reading based
Mm-hmm.
on the way the brain learns to read. And I
Yes.
understand why Orton Gillingham tutors, who are more like reading therapists and not
Mm-hmm.
just tutors, are so expensive. So to bring
Yes.
that to parents and that information in the way you do is so invaluable. I don't know if people understand quite how much money you are saving them by teaching
I'm
them these
trying.
tips. It really is. And I think that is part of our what we're working towards, you and I and
Mhm.
so many other accounts
Yes.
on Instagram, is letting parents know there's not a problem now, but let's prevent a problem
Yes.
from ever happening. They think, "Oh,
Absolutely.
my child's gonna be fine. It's just pre-K, it's just kindergarten. I don't have
Yes.
to do
I was
anything."
fine when I learned to read.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yep.
yes. So just that, education piece in a really empathetic way, because I get it.
Absolutely.
If you weren't in this world, you might not realize the shift that's happening and what's been happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So
Yeah.
let's think about this parent that's listening and they want to start teaching their child to read. Maybe they're at
Yay.
the very beginning steps and they're wondering, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. Where do I even get started? How do I get
Hmm.
started? What would you say to that parent?
Yes. First of all, congratulations for taking that step of wanting to teach your kid to read. I know it can feel really overwhelming, and so I just want to commend you for trying out something new. And all parents want the best for their kid, but the step to actually doing something about it and having a more hands-on approach, I love it. So that's awesome. The first thing I would tell that parent is you're probably already doing some sort of literacy teaching. If you're talking to them, you are beginning to lay that foundation for reading comprehension that they're going to need. So when they're reading a text and you've gone to the zoo with them and talked about the animals and how they look, they're going to have background knowledge to be able to comprehend that text later. So if you're talking to them, you've already started the the approach to teaching them to read. If you're talking about letters, that is a huge piece as well. And not just the letters, but the sounds. That teaching the sounds correctly, I am a big advocate on that. So instead of saying B spells buh, we want to clip off the and say buh. So reading up on how to teach sounds correctly. But most importantly, before we get into the nitty gritty of sounds and blending and all that stuff, phonological awareness and phonemic awareness are a huge piece that is missing in a lot of kids' reading understanding. And what phonological awareness is this understanding of how our language works. So counting words in a sentence, clapping out syllables, being able to substitute syllables or take them out. So if I said, say doghouse, your kid would say doghouse. Now say doghouse, but don't say dog. Then your kid would have to think about that and say house. And then if we narrow that in a little bit more, phonemic awareness, which is paying attention to individual sounds and words. And this is the most sophisticated part of phonological awareness. So if you think of phonological awareness as this umbrella, and a lot of people refer to it as work then that can be done with your eyes closed. Um, Phonemic awareness is really narrowing in on individual sounds and words. And kids have to have that understanding of sounds make up words. So at is the word bat, in order to be able to transfer that to seeing the word bat and being able to read that. So, for parents out there, keep talking to your kids, draw their attention to different parts of words. So, if you see, um, let's say, if you see a road sign, you can read it for them and think about, ask them, how many syllables are in the word stop? Stop, one syllable. How many sounds do you hear in stop? Stop, four sounds. And just drawing their attention to different parts of words. And you can do all of this through games, which again, I'm a very big proponent on using games and play to teach these skills, but just bringing their awareness to sounds, to parts of words, to how our language is structured. That would be the first big step, which it's a beast, and I feel like I've talked for a really long time on
No,
this.
it's so important. That step is
Yeah.
definitely missing. And even a lot of teachers are not comfortable with that step of phonological and phonemic awareness and the
Yes.
importance of it. So, to make sure that teachers know and that parents know, I think is so helpful. You can incorporate those types of games and activities all throughout your day as a parent
Hmm.
when your child's in the bath or when they're in the
Yes.
car eating lunch.
Hmm.
I love making this reading instruction time part of your life. I really would push back when people say teaching your child to read is early academics. I really don't think teaching your child to read should be classified as academics. It's just a life skill. We
Absolutely.
absolutely should classify it as a life skill that we want to teach our
Yes.
child. And it's throughout our day, not just in this 10 to 15 minutes that we're sitting down doing
Hmm.
a reading lesson. We can be working on it all day, which is what
Yes.
I do with my kids.
Yes,
They're like,
I know.
Mom, like, how
It's
many
so
sounds
fun
in this word?
though. It is so fun to teach your kid to read. And I wish that's another thing I wish parents knew is when something clicks and when they remember an alphabet, the name of an alphabet letter or a sound, it's just the best feeling in the world. Like, wow, I did that. I'm opening up your whole world.
Yes,
And recently, so I tutor, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here. I'm just
please.
so excited about literacy. I tutor a preschool student, and his mom was just concerned he's not remembering the alphabet. He just seems to be a little slow with picking those up, and so I love that she got help before he even went to kindergarten. Do I suggest that for every child? Not necessarily, but she did not want him to start off kindergarten lacking confidence, like you were saying earlier, and just feeling like we had to rush to get him up to speed. So, using a very systematic approach, I got to hear him read his first word a few months ago, which is so bittersweet. I was basically in tears because he came to me not knowing the alphabet and now he's blending words together. But then I also felt like I was taking away this special moment from him and his parents. So I do want that for all parents. I want you to have the skills and the confidence really to be able to say, I can do this. I mean, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Teachers all over the world, we're figuring it out too. So parents can absolutely do this.
I love that story. And I remember very vividly when my son was reading his first words and his first Bob book. It was a Bob decodable book.
Oh, yes.
And I have a video and we watched that. And I talked to him and I say, who taught you to read? And he says, you did, mom. He knows that
Oh
I
my
taught him to
gosh.
read. And you're exactly right. I unlocked this world for him, this world of literacy that now he can go and read on his own. He can learn facts. He can read stories to entertain himself. I am just so proud of that. And that, like you said, is what I want all parents to feel and to know that they can do it, to have that confidence in themselves. Because,
Mhm.
like you said, they know their child best. They're their child's best
Mhm.
teacher.
Yep,
Oh, that's
absolutely.
so wonderful. Now, of course, you and I both talk about reading online, but I loved your
Mhm.
recent reel about handwriting and fine motor skills
Yes,
because
yes,
that
yes.
I think sometimes can get maybe pushed down. Reading gets
Mhm.
prioritized and the handwriting, spelling, and the fine motor skills maybe don't get prioritized as much. So I'd love
Yes.
for you to speak on that a little bit and the importance of handwriting.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I have always been a big proponent of teaching handwriting. However, I was never able to do it as a classroom teacher because the days are just so jam-packed of everything. And you would almost get a slap on the wrist if you try to incorporate explicit handwriting practice, especially in my world of upper elementary, middle school. Like there just wasn't time for it. And so what we know is there's more research coming out, especially with, the generation that's grown up with technology, is we know that writing things down, handwriting are extremely important for retention of information rather than just typing notes. So we have research that tells us that yes, handwriting is important. Yes, taking physical notes is important. And I just feel like schools are still kind of pushing one-to-one devices, which is not inherently bad, but when we rely on only technology for literacy support or typing out things, we just lose a lot of the fundamentals that are so important to retaining that information. And so I have started to dig into the research. I've started to dig into ways to support my 3-year-old of how to have the fine motor skills. And so I'm not giving her a pencil and asking her to write the alphabet or write her name, but there are so many things that parents can do to develop hand strength, which would support them in holding a pencil and having legible handwriting later on, because we know that the hand doesn't fully form until a child is 6. And so if we're asking them to write sentences and paragraphs before then, their hand just might not be ready for that. And so things like pouring water from a pitcher into cups or playing with Play-Doh, um, having the little kid tweezers that they pick up little balls and put them at different places. There are so many different ways to strengthen their hands that doesn't require a pencil to do that. And I think that's the most fun part is because it's less work for the parent, yet it's so effective for the skills that your child needs in order to be a good writer.
Yes, we cannot just go from 0 to 180. We need to
Yes.
step by step, and building
Hmm.
those fine motor skills is part of that progression. And like you
Yes.
said, so much fun to do.
It is fun and my kid loves it. Like if I just put a cup of water in front of her, she'll spend hours just pouring it back and forth. I'm like,
Yes.
wow, I feel like such a great parent right now and I'm not doing anything.
I love that. So, as a mom and a reading specialist, I would love
Hmm.
to know, are there some things that you specifically do to make sure that
Hmm.
your kids are prepared for reading? And maybe there's something you specifically don't do that
Hmm.
you made that choice because you're a reading specialist.
I love this question. I focus mostly as I'm thinking of this question. I don't know if something that I don't do that I'm a reading specialist, but right now I have the luxury of having a 3-year-old, which means I'm not trying to rush her into reading. We are definitely all about play with letters, and I go at her pace. So if that's 5 minutes of looking at letters, talking about the shapes and the name and the sound, and then she's done, great. If she spends 30 minutes and she asks me to tutor her because she watches me tutor kids all the time, then we sit and spend 30 minutes. So I have the luxury of kind of just playing around with that timetable, not pressuring her, because the more that parents pressure, the more that the kids feel that they're very aware, and then that pushback starts to happen. So if you're a parent out there and you are feeling that pushback, so you're trying to sit down at the dinner table with them and have them sit down and read and they're just not doing it, let's think of a different approach rather than forcing. So a lot of times giving choices. So do you want to read this book before or after dinner? So still having them have that autonomy to think about their own learning, but within a structure that the parents put in place. So a lot of times with my own daughter, with my own 3-year-old, do you want to practice 3 or 4 letters today? And usually she wants to do more, and so she's already more excited to do that. um, Reading aloud is super important in our house. We have hundreds of books like I see behind you. um, but a lot of parents think that reading aloud to their child is enough, and that's going to teach them to be able to be a reader. Reading aloud is so important to build background knowledge so your kids can hear fluent reading, so you can have that bonding time with your child. But for most kids, that is not going to teach them to do the act of reading. So we like to go to the library and check out books on different topics. So expanding their knowledge around the world. That is something that I do, but I know that that's not going to necessarily teach my kids to read. So right now, I'm just taking a really relaxed approach, and just kind of going at her pace. And then if she's 5 and 6 and still not getting to know the sounds, the alphabet letters, then it's going to become more of a structured, okay, I need a plan. Let's put something in place. But for those parents out there who have toddlers, this is a perfect time just to play around and use a lot of movement, play a lot of games. And then parents of older kids, you can absolutely play games too, but we just need a more structured approach to figure out how to get your child from point A to where they need to be at point B. I
Yes,
don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I
you
danced around
did.
that.
No, it was great. And like you were saying with your 3-year-old, you have this long runway. You are not in an
Yes.
emergency. This isn't a
Mhm.
stressful situation. This is just a nice long runway. And I actually started with my son when he was 3, and thinking there was no rush. He could learn at his
Yes.
own pace, and he was reading by 3.5, not because I was forcing
Amazing.
it or rushing
Yeah.
him, but because we played, it was fun, and he was ready. And I
Mhm.
think that's an important note, is that our kids are developing at different speeds. Their
Mhm.
brains are processing information at different speeds. And for him, it
Yep.
just worked. And if another child is going to take longer, that's okay. But like you said,
Yeah.
once they're getting to 5 and 6, you've been working on it in a casual, fun way, and they're not remembering, it might be time to put more of a structured plan in place.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I also wanted to circle back to your library comment. I am a huge fan of the library for all
It's
parents.
amazing.
The f
Yes.
the amazingness of getting free books, and our library lets you check out 50 books per
Oh my
library card,
gosh.
and we have 3 library cards, and so there are times when we have had 150 library books checked out, depending on projects or what my kids are interested in, and I always say when I go to the library, I feel like Oprah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get a book, you get a book,
Yes.
everybody gets a book. I never have to say no because they can get all the books. My kids are very responsible, and we always make sure we turn them back in.
Love it. Love
But
it.
it's so fun to just be able to say, "Yes, yes, you can have all these books, and let's go home and read them and dive
Yes.
into them." And we found so many great series that way that we will maybe
Uh-huh.
then purchase, but after we've read them free from the library, because sometimes kids are not gonna be into a series, and it's nice to
Yes.
save money.
Absolutely. Libraries are so amazing. I mean, if there is someone out there who's not using their public library, please go do it. There are so
Yes,
many resources beyond just books. It's
that's true
amazing
too.
everything that they have.
Totally agree. And a librarian commented on a recent YouTube video of mine saying they do have Bob decodable books.
Oh,
So if you are looking for
nice.
decodable books, which we didn't touch a ton on decodable books, but I have
Mhm.
Other resources for parents, if you're listening, if you want to check out my YouTube channel or my podcast, I talk about decodable books, and apparently libraries will have Bob books. So that's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
A great
Yes.
start. Yes. All right. So, as we are wrapping up, I would just love to know what you think the biggest takeaway is for this episode. If listeners could remember one thing.
One thing, I preach this over and over. Parents are the best teacher for their child. If you are a homeschool parent, keep up the good work. Keep on that path. If you are not a homeschool parent, you can still absolutely be, and you are your parents' first, your child's first teacher. Parents are their child's first teacher. So I want you to know, and I got this comment all the time as a teacher, I'm sure you did too, of people saying, wow, I bet you're a great teacher because you have so much patience. And patience is a really, really small part of teaching. So if you're a parent out there and you think, I don't have enough patience to teach my child to read, that's a small part. You don't have to have the most patience in the world. You have to have a plan, and you have to have the willingness to learn and to work with your child. So parents can absolutely teach their children to read, no matter where their child is, if they're a toddler or if they're a 10-year-old.
What a great takeaway. I agree with you 100%. All right. So, this is called the Littles Love Learning podcast. So, I would love to know what you love most about working with littles.
Oh gosh, you can make everything into a game. And it is the most fun ever. Even if you have just two boxes and you put words in each box and you tell them to pick a word out and read it, they think it's the most fun thing ever. So, you parents out there, you're probably more creative than you give yourself credit for. Find some boxes, put words in the box, have them go on a treasure hunt. The sky is the limit with how you can help the little ones learn to read, and they are naturally so engaged and wanting to know more about their world. So capitalize on that and it- just have so much fun.
Thank you. That was such great advice. All right. We are wrapping up our time together. So, please tell everyone where they can get in touch with you. I know they're going to want to learn more about what you offer and how you can help support them as they teach their child to read.
Yes. So I am most active on Instagram. So you can find me at Becca Pratt underscore teach. You can also go to beccapratt.com, and I have a bunch of resources for parents on there to just get you started with that journey. And I also offer individual coaching for parents. So I work with you to figure out where your child is and then make a plan for them. And you can submit your video of your lessons so I can really figure out what's going well, what I can still support you in to get your child reading. So, yes, I would love to connect with you all and hear from you.
Great. Okay. I will make sure to link all of those down in the show notes so that people can get in touch. What a wonderful offer that you have for them. And thank you, Becca, for
Yes.
your time. This has been
Thank you
wonderful. I
so
appreciate it.
much. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity.